position on crime and public safety. So with that said, you're recognized, and once you get done, we'll open the floor to any questions, okay?
Good morning to everyone. How are you doing today? I'll try one more time. Good morning. How's everyone doing today? So first and foremost, I thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the issue of public safety within Jackson. I'll limit my introductory remarks so that we can get to the meat of the discussion and scratch where you may be itching in terms of how you're able to best assist the city of Jackson. I do want to begin the meeting and recognize this. I was unable to attend the last meeting due to unfortunate and confirmed illness. Giving you a little more information than you want to know, I had tonsillitis, which meant not only was I sick, the action of talking would have been very complicated and difficult for me. But nonetheless, I'm happy that we're here today to talk about this important issue. Public safety is not only important to me as mayor of this city, but it's important to me personally. Many of you may not know that when I was a young boy, approximately 4th grade, my older brother was shot in the head right here in Jackson, Mississippi. And the gentleman who shot him was later killed himself. So I have seen firsthand the cycle of violence that happens and far too often we see within our community. The city of Jackson has taken a number of steps in order to address this. First and foremost, we have never submitted to the public or the national narrative of defunding the police. In fact, I have done the exact opposite, not only supporting raises initially for our entry-level officers, but then coupling that now with the highest raises that the city of Jackson has ever offered. Chief Davis presented that to us at the start of our budgetary discussions, and we presented it to the council in order to find a way to make it more attractive in the field of law enforcement. Additionally, we've given them equipment and technology to their benefit that they've never had. When we came into office, we had officers riding around in vehicles that lacked air conditioning, much less the sufficient tools in order to fight crime. Now you see, and it is customary to see SUVs with JPD because we provided them with that. We also provided firsthand technology that not only the city of Jackson had never seen before, but is the first of its kind in the state of Mississippi in a real-time command center. Knowing that these tools are helpful but not the panacea, we've also brought together a coalition of vested people or entities that have agency over this issue. And that is why we convene the crime summit without the cameras, without reporters being present, because we wanted it to be a working session. It was out of those discussions that the initiation of a conversation about securing a holding facility actually emerged. And the city of Jackson, our police department, Chief Davis, specifically Deputy Chief Vincent Grizel, began touring the Jackson facility that is in the possession of Hinds County. We believe that is necessary because, one, we know that our Hinds County jail is under a consent decree. And so we started initiating that process, and we're still within that process. And we have not secured the property, not because we don't desire it and not because it's not important to us, but because there are a number of significant deficiencies within the facility. And what we don't want to assume is a liability once we start housing people in this facility, where you have plumbing issues, for example, significant plumbing issues that need to be addressed. And so this discussion will be followed up with a letter to each one of you outlining the specific request of the city of Jackson, but that is certainly one of those needs, is money to secure that facility so that we can move forward. Additionally, I think it's important to recognize that we have requested a number of tools for our officers to help reduce the amount of time that it takes for people to go from arrest to actual prosecution. One of the things that we have asked is for ballistic technology that enables officers to collect shell cases on the scene and be able to make or to detain people with sufficient probable cause for their detention, whereas we know that our state crime lab is overburdened, and sometimes that delay leads to people being out, and the effort to avenge certain crimes becomes all the more probable in those circumstances, and that is why that technology is important. I will conclude my introductory remarks by pointing out a few things. One, that our entire justice system is stretched beyond its capacity. You have officers who are making arrests each and every day, that are taking people to jail that often before they even make it to the jail, because I receive the calls to try to intercept this issue, they're being told that they can't house the people that they are arresting. And so they're trying to figure out how do they execute their responsibilities of keeping the community safe when there is no place to house them. We've had domestic violence circumstances where there was a fear of someone being killed, that because issues at the jail, or maybe they had a minor injury and they refused treatment, that there was some issue of where we would house them and how we would deal with those matters, and so that is of concern. And then you have a court system in Hinds County that is more than 2 years in backlogged, meaning that cases aren't going to trial. And so people are often walking the streets with serious felonies over their head. And then you have, as I mentioned, not only a state crime lab, but you have a medical examiner's office that are overburdened, and they are unable to have complete files in order for prosecutors to be able to take them to trial. And so we have to be able to rectify all of the gaps within our judicial process. Now, I did start my statement by clarifying, because it is a misnomer amongst some communities and some people with me about my support of the police. I've always been supportive of everything that the police department has asked me about. So I made it clear that I have never been in support of the notion of defunding the police, that national narrative. I've done the opposite. But I will make it clear that I do understand the proposition that the issue of public safety is far more broad than simply the issue of policing. To illustrate that point, I want to give you some data. Out of our victims of homicide, 78% were male, 20% female, 1 fetus, and 2% unknown. 62% are from straight disputes and domestic encounters. 71% are interpersonal. 28% are related to crimes, and less than 1% was accidental. 91% are attributed to handgun, rifle, or assault rifle. And the majority of our violence, or the strongest peak in our crime, has been amongst our youngest demographic. It is very difficult for police officers to be able to police what takes place in the home, or between parties that know each other, or in the privacy of their engagement wherever that takes place. And so while I support the proposition of building a strong police force, giving them all of the tools in order to do their jobs, I believe that our work is more expansive than that. And that is why we have worked with agencies or organizations like the National League of Cities, along with Wells Fargo Bank. We've now received interest from United Healthcare to help support the creation of an Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery. We have fellows from Harvard who are coming to assist us in building the foundation of this office. I believe that we need people who are working 24/7 on the issues of how we deal with the socioeconomic challenges within our communities that often lead to this violence. When we look at communities that have more visible police departments, we often make the one-to-one association that that is why they are safer. I believe that their visibility does have impact, but what we fail to realize is that often those communities have a higher average household income, and the associated trauma and issues of poverty are not as present within those communities as we find in Jackson. And so I ask that you support the request of our police department. I ask that you support being able to fully outfit our real-time crime center and the other things that I've asked for, the detention center. But I also ask for your support in standing up an office that tries to eliminate those challenges before it gets to the police, before it gets to the issue of us trying to solve those cases and how we move forward in that way. With that, that will be the end of my introductory remarks, and I'm pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. First, I'll ask the members of the committee, both here and on Zoom, if they have any questions. Lady from Hines, Ms. Yates.
Good morning, Mayor. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good morning.
I have a few follow-up questions for you. First, with respect to the holding facility, I know that that's been an ongoing topic of conversation for quite some time. Do we have a time frame as to when we could expect that to be completed?
The best I can provide you in the way of an answer is that we recently had what was intended to be our final walkthrough. And upon that final walkthrough, it was not in sufficient condition for the city of Jackson to take control of it. To that point, I mentioned the significant plumbing issues within the building. We want to make certain that we begin with the end in mind. There's already concern and already organizations that are warning us if we step out of line that they will pursue litigation against the city of Jackson. And so that is why that is important to us. We also know that holding facility, and some people are unaware of this, the size of the cells are not to the standards of what 2022 detention centers look like. And as we're opening this again, that limits the amount of time that we can actually detain people within that facility. And that is why we continue to say that it is a short-term holding facility, not a misdemeanor facility. We make sure we stay out of legal trouble. Thank you, City Attorney. We can't say that, and it is not that, but that is where we are with that. Hopefully, prayerfully, it will be soon. I think that funding to support those capital improvements to the facilities will help shorten that time frame.
Is there a dollar amount as to what is still needed to get the facility to a place where it could open? And then, again, not to just continue to press, but can we get something more than soon? What are we talking? Does soon mean a year? Does that mean a couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, for me, the only reason I can give you soon is because it's not within my control. It's not with the department that I run. I don't own it to put the, and I don't have the money, to put into it. And so I ask that you just, you have some patience with us because we're relying on a third party and the information that they provide us in order to know that timeline. With respect to the dollar amount, when I follow up with the letter that will go to each one of the committee members, we will do our best to associate the remaining cost to its repairs.
Is the third party that you reference, is that Hinds County? Is it the county?
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Has the city looked at an interim solution while waiting on the county to do whatever needs to be done with respect to this holding facility, such as maybe some sort of intercity or any inter-county agreement with surrounding cities or counties, as far as the city of Jackson being able to take arrestees to those jails?
Actually, we have, and I thank you for mentioning that, because that allows me to speak to other efforts that we have endeavored to take on. I guess at this point, about 4 to 5 years ago now, I not only reached out to Madison County and Rankin County, and at that time, I guess not 4 years because it was actually during the pandemic, so about two almost 3 years ago now, and they indicated that they were not in a position to house our detainees. I then reached out to Yazoo and Holmes County. We were able to broker an agreement, but we found resistance or some challenge to that from our judges, or not all of our judges, but some of our judges. I want to be cautious over what I say there, because there's been some dispute over what was said and what wasn't said, and I don't want to misrepresent anyone, but there was certainly concern about those agreements, and so we thought about that. We were prepared to pay them for the cost of their detention. If we can work out those issues, then we would happily use that as a recourse. The reality is it's often been associated with misdemeanor crimes, but the cost of housing people for misdemeanors that will be there for short-term stays, it would actually probably benefit us most if some of the longer-term detainees were taken to those facilities as opposed to the facilities that are within the county.
So is the city willing to reach back out to those cities or counties again to see if that's a possible solution, at least in the short term?
Absolutely. Not attempting to speak for them, but they were amenable then. It wasn't contentious negotiations, and so I would assume that the opportunity still exists.
And perhaps now with judicial elections having just occurred, we could get a different answer from the court system?
I won't speak to that.
With respect to the youngest demographic that you mentioned, committing a high volume of the crime in the city, I think we've all seen that. I think at some point it was mentioned that a curfew was going to be instituted by the city. Did that ever actually come to fruition?
Yes, I actually signed executive orders for multiple curfews, at least two through the course of my tenure. And in some instances, it allowed officers to remove guns and other threats from off of the street. Where the limitations exist is that the detention center was at its capacity. There are restrictions on housing youth offenders along with adults. And so our bark was louder than our bite. And so one thing that I failed to mention out of the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery is that we also want to create, in that office, we want to not only hire credible messengers, people who have an ability to relate to young people and steer them in the right direction. We want to hire people who go into the community and actually diffuse violent circumstances. But we also want to bring on social workers within the city of Jackson. We want to create a curfew center. And so what this curfew center will look like is that instead of just implementing a curfew, picking them up and returning them to the same homes that they left out of to begin with, we can take them to a place where professionals exist that can speak to them about the challenges that may be occurring in the home. Every child who's out beyond curfew has not committed a crime. Those that have, there is a process in place, and hopefully if we eliminate the need to house so many people, those that have committed a crime can go to the place where those who have committed crimes go. Those that have other issues taking place that are likely to lead to either a violent circumstance or some issue that we will have to contend with later can go to the curfew centers so that we can interrupt the cycle of what is taking place.
And This may be a better question for the chief. You may know the answer to this, I'm not sure. With respect to those teenage arrestees or those that are committing crimes that are being arrested, at least from the news coverage that we're seeing, it seems that many of those are repeat offenders, meaning they're being arrested multiple times, repeatedly, often for violent crimes repeatedly. Is that the consensus, or is that only what we're seeing in the media? Are you guys seeing the same group of young people consistently being arrested and rearrested?
That is what has been reported to me from Chief Davis and the rest of our law enforcement. Particularly to note with respect to a lot of our carjackings and our auto theft. And so they almost can narrow it down to an exact science of who has gotten out and when they've gotten out based on those repeated offenses. So it's not that JPD isn't on the job. JPD is on the job. They are arresting them. But because we have the other parts of our judicial process stretched to their capacity, they're re-released and they go right back into the cycle, and they learn that there's limited consequences for what their offenses. And so that's what we're seeing. And I don't know if the chief wants to expand on that either, chief.
I think the mayor covered it.
Okay. Thank you.
The gentleman from Rankin.
Thank y'all for coming. I want to start by commending you on the real-time command center. That's a very effective operation that you have there, and I think that's going to help long-term a lot further. You mentioned that you was asking for help from the state. How can we help with that?
Well, so let me first, and I appreciate that, and I would actually slightly amend that statement to say this. I think that it is a wonderful idea right now, and with the appropriate funding, it will be an effective tool. Because I want to manage expectations as to where it is right now. It has amazing abilities and capacity, but there are blind spots. And so one of the tools it has is license plate reading technology on those cameras. And so when someone carjacks someone, for instance, and it's in the system as a stolen car, every time they pass one of those cameras, we can give our officers a real-time account of where to find them and how to intercept them. The fact that we don't have as many cameras as we need means that there are limitations. We need them to go to specific areas that I will not outline, while we're being recorded. But if we're able to cover where we have gaps, that will help us. And also, we are now in the process, we have set the salary of trying to hire people to be present to be able to provide that information to officers from the Real-Time Crime Center. I'm not only asking for support in the way of helping to complete that facility, I'm also offering an ability for additional law enforcement agencies to partner with us there. We can accommodate other law enforcement agencies. Now, we put some seed money into it, right? And so we don't want to do that absolutely free, but we are welcoming to other law enforcement agencies to join us there, use it as a tool to effectively fight crime as well. And that's from everyone from county, state, to federal level. It is actually a tool that if the unfortunate event we had a threat to Homeland Security here in Jackson, it is a tool that could be useful to protecting the greater Jackson area.
I agree with that. I've been to the facility. I've actually worked with Sam and those guys a little bit on a couple of projects. So I commend y'all for that, and I would like to see it be useful for all the departments around that especially the Capitol Police and maybe the Highway Patrol and Sheriff's. It's a really good deal. So anyway, the second thing is probably a little bit harder question, but this was not your doing, but the city of Jackson signed a consent decree about not booking misdemeanor prisoners, just turning them loose, and I'm curious as to how you're going to overcome that with if you're trying to put in a holding facility with that situation. Are y'all going to try to get that consent decree modified, or what's going to happen with that? Thank you.
Yes. So the crime summit that I referenced, we broke out into various working groups. One related to patrol and operations, another one that dealt with detention matters, and another group was legal and policy. And so our legal arm and all of the agencies that were engaged, that was one of the issues that they discussed. And so our city attorney's office is looking to re-engage in those negotiations because we don't believe that it met the intended plan of either the organization that we met that agreement with or the city of Jackson. And so we would like to revisit that agreement. That is within our plans at this time.
Thank you.
Lady from Madison, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mayor, for being here today. You had mentioned the domestic violence number. Did you say 60% of your arrests are domestic violence?
62%, and this comes from, we have a data scientist on staff with the city of Jackson or contracted with the city of Jackson. And so 62% are from what I have here, straight disputes and domestic violence. I do not have a definition for you of straight disputes. I would assume that is, people knowing each other. Yeah.
Okay, well, tell me if you have your data speaks to how many of those are drug related.
Well, first and foremost, I have more extensive charts, here with me. I have not reviewed them sufficiently enough to be able to extrapolate that data, in time to not have you wait for an answer. But we do have the ability to pull out that data.
Okay, that would be great if you could get that. And also, the last time when Chief Davis was here, I had asked him about the reporting system, and he had said that y'all have not been able to participate in that, and I think that is a requirement, if I'm not mistaken. When do you see that going live?
We have an emergency purchase of a new data software underway right now. The misstep is that the city of Jackson secured Tyler Technologies. That tool is helpful on things like our administrative side, our finance side. It is not as useful of a tool on our public safety side. We have found that several other cities have had those challenges, and so our failure to report is not a nefarious effort. It is not a willful design in order to not report. It is because there are compatibility issues with the technology that we are using now, and we have an emergency acquisition underway right now of new technology that better supports our public safety sectors.
So we're thinking by the end of the year?
I don't, the only thing I'm in control of today is what I tell you, and so I don't want to tell you anything that is a misrepresentation. I will have to get with our IT department to see how long that transition will take. I will just say that it is a priority for us, and we're working to do that, and we will do it as soon as we possibly can. And it is something that the police department has lifted up as a challenge from the very start, and of concern to them.
Good. One last question. How many officers do you have budgeted?
304.
I'm going to let the chief answer that because I don't know.
We're budgeted for 304.
And how many are currently on the streets or working today?
We have 248 sworn police officers that is ready for duty today.
And why do we have a gap there? Why are we not fully staffed?
Well, we had a challenge prior to this budget. We was just not making enough money. So I want to thank the mayor, I thank city council for giving us the significant raise that we needed because we was losing officers. But now I'm proud to say that we have experienced officers wanting to come back to Jackson. And also we have people inspiring to be police, wanting to police in Jackson, want to go to our academy due to that pay increase. Was very attractive.
Yeah, I believe as with any occupation, compensation has a significant impact on that. And so we believe that making it more attractive in that way will produce better results. But I do think that we can't go forward with that question without recognizing that we are part and parcel of a national trend, right? This isn't a Jackson issue. This is a national issue where all police departments are finding themselves stretched with meeting their quotas or sufficient numbers of people of officers within their ranks. And so I think there are a number of things that we have to look at. We have to look at the salary and compensation. We have to look at the responsibilities within the job itself. When I talk about the need to provide other additional supports in the way of social workers and mental health professionals and the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery, to date, we're asking officers to be mental health experts. We're asking officers to go to homes where family members are calling because they know that they have a family member who has a mental health issue, only to go to that circumstance, try to intervene as best as they know how, for family members to get upset and sometimes attack the officers themselves. And so I think that we just need to arm ourselves with a more well-rounded, no pun intended, with a more well-rounded contingent of professional support to deal with all of the challenges that exist within our community.
You brought up mental health. What do you do with your, when you have someone that you've arrested and you realize that do you have someone to evaluate them to see if they have a mental issue, and what do you do with them then?
I'm gonna let the Assistant Chief Wade answer that.
I haven't arrested anybody, so I'm gonna let him talk to that.
First of all, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. First of all, I want to bring you greetings from the hard-working men and women of the Jackson Police Department. I'm Joseph Wade. I serve as the Assistant Chief. I'm a 27-year veteran, and I serve under the leadership of Chief James E. Davis. First of all, we have officers that are specially and have received specialized training in crisis intervention. They are trained in how to deal with the mentally ill. We have a large population within the city of Jackson who are not only homeless, but they suffer from mental illness. We have officers who respond to the scene, who interact with these individuals, who ask them a series of questions. We understand that the best remedy for someone that we've come in contact with who is suffering from mental illness is not to arrest that person. It's to get that person help. We have a partnership along with Hines Behavioral Health, also with St. Dominic's Hospital, Merit Health, and we work to transport these individuals to the hospital to get them the help that they need. We understand that arresting that person is not going to fix the issue of mental illness. So we have probably around 50 to 60 officers who have been trained in dealing with the mentally ill. That is a huge initiative for us and a huge partnership with Hines Behavioral Health. And I want to add some context to what the mayor was speaking to. The issue that we're running into in the city of Jackson is that the criminal element is thriving because they're operating in an environment of no consequence. No consequence for their action. The hard-working men and women of the Jackson Police Department in 2021 arrested 3,296 individuals. 3,296 individuals. In 2022, they arrested 3,440 individuals. That means they arrested them, they went through the booking process. But since March of 2020, Jackson police officers have fear released 6,218 individuals. 6,218 individuals. That means these individuals did not go through a booking process. The officer came in contact with this individual who was committing a criminal act, and they had nowhere to take that individual. They had no holding facility, no jail. They couldn't take them home with them, so they had to field release that individual. 6,218 individuals. That contributes to a lot of issues and problems that we're facing in the city of Jackson. We have over 30,000 active warrants, misdemeanors, because the issue with the 6,218 people that you field released, only 30% return for their arraignment, their court appearance. It is creating a huge morale issue for Chief Davis and our police department, because when an officer comes in contact with someone who's committed a criminal act, they give them a pink sheet of paper and tell them they've been field released. Then that individual throws the piece of paper on the ground. What are you going to do, field release them for littering? You know, they use the analogy of a dog. That's a dog barking with no teeth. All right? There's no bite to our actions. Recidivists, same individuals over and over and over again. That's an issue. That's a problem, not only for the citizens of Jackson, but also for our police officers who are arresting the same people over and over again. It's truly impacting our law enforcement efforts here in the city of Jackson. Like the mayor stated, and like the chief stated, we don't have a monopoly on this, but we're concerned about what's going on here in the city of Jackson, because we have good citizens who are suffering because the lack of a holding facility, a lack of a jail is impacting our enforcement efforts.
Would you mind repeating why, or how do you determine who is field release and who is not? Basically, everyone that you're arresting is being released?
Because they are denied, the officers are being denied the ability to detain them in the county jail. They only field release them after they radio into the jail, and they are being told that we cannot house them. That is why they do the field release.
So most everyone that gets arrested is released?
Let me add, I appreciate that. The pay or stay settlement that was referenced earlier also has some association with that. It's often stated that our municipal judges may give too lenient of bond requirements at times. Well, that is associated with the fact that we're under the pay or stay settlement. And if you give them a bond that they're unable to meet, then the settlement says that you have to release them within 48 hours. And so sometimes what our judges are trying to give them is the most reasonable bond that they may actually pay in order to assure their presence back at the next stage of the proceedings against them.
Mayor, how long is that consent decree in place for?
I believe 2016.
When does it end? If
It doesn't end.
Okay.
that was one of the failures within the negotiation.
Is this on? Sorry. Tori Martin, I'm the city attorney for the city of Jackson. So the pay or stay settlement agreement we entered into in 2016. And the reason why we entered into that agreement was because at the time, the MacArthur Justice Center accused us of requiring individuals to either pay or be incarcerated. And so we entered into the agreement essentially stating that we would no longer hold individuals, we would no longer incarcerate them based on an inability to pay. But what happened in reality is when we entered into that agreement, all of our misdemeanor or defendants accused of misdemeanors are now being field released. And so you asked a question earlier, the gentleman from Rankin County, about what we had done. So we've met with the MacArthur Justice Center to specifically discuss this issue. And what came out of that meeting is that there is essentially a loophole in the agreement that says if we have a repeat offender and they fail to appear, then the judge judge can incarcerate them. But there's two problems with that. One is that means that a judge would have to immediately see them. And so as our JPD officers are arresting them, they're field releasing them because we don't have anywhere to hold them. And so that kind of comes back to this holding facility and why it's so important.
I understand that the holding facility, but it still seems, even if you have that, you have this consent decree, of which gentleman from Rankin alluded to. So my question is, I guess, to that effect, you have the consent decree, what good is the holding facility if you still got under that decree?
So MacArthur Justice Center has agreed with us that if we have repeat offenders, that there's a loophole in that agreement that allows us to hold those individuals.
I understand that, but what about the first-time offender? About the first?
It will not allow us to hold the first-time offender.
Is it not possible to go back to court to modify that agreement? Can the city of Jackson not open back up a lawsuit to that effect?
Well,
That is the present negotiation that is taking place. We're trying to negotiate, and I want to be clear, as the gentleman from Rankin County very kindly made you aware that I was not in office at that time. Neither was our city attorney. She was not our city attorney at the time that agreement was reached, and so this is something that she has very appropriately and necessarily revisited on behalf of the city of Jackson.
Lady Madison, I'm sorry I cut you off. Any more questions?
I had them, but I can't, I'll think of them in a minute. Go ahead.
Okay, lady from Hines, Judge Gibbs.
Yeah, thanks for putting that into existence, huh?
Just remember that if I ever approve for you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all so much for being here. And I have spoken before with the chief in terms of trying to help us here in the city in terms of being safe. So I want to extend my gratitude for all the things that you all are doing, your officers, because I know you all are working hard and we all are trying to help with the perception that Jackson isn't safe so that all of our citizens will feel safe and protected. So that's what we're here today, to figure out how can we as a state help. My question is, and I had a number of them and you've answered some of them already. You mentioned that there were 304 budgeted slots for officers. My question is, with the size of Jackson and the type of crimes that are being committed, is that adequate as far as the 304?
Let me start before you go. I think that we recognize, and I want him to get to the specifics of your question, there's a need for more officers. There was a study some time ago that said that Jackson needed approximately 500 officers. Now, notable is that at the time that study was reached, the population has declined, and so you would imagine that that number is less, and so we have to find the middle ground between what that study revealed and where we are now.
All right. Okay. And just to add a little bit more context to that, yes, we currently have 248 sworn Jackson police officers. We're budgeted for 304. To answer your question, I've been there since 1995. The chief was here prior to me. I do remember a point in time where we were at 500, but a lot of things have transpired, like the population, but also what we've been facing in the past couple of years in law enforcement, not only here in Jackson, but across the country, from New York City to LA, and also I spoke with an individual with the Secret Service on last week. With the pandemic, as you know, police officers couldn't work remotely. They had to work. They had to come out and work. That impacted our numbers tremendously, our recruiting efforts. Normally we will have 200, 300, 400 pool of applicants wanting to be Jackson police officers. We were down to 20, and we were lucky if we hired 3. Thanks to Chief Davis' leadership, the last recruit class we graduated 2 months ago was 15. So, and we've hired about 60 over the past 2 years. But with the pandemic, with the anti-police rhetoric that's going on across the country because of the civil unrest, it has tremendously impacted our numbers of individuals, qualified individuals who want to be in law enforcement. I think that we're going to be able to overcome a lot of that with the pay increase, because $30,000 starting off in law enforcement is nothing. All right?
I want to add to that. Another thing that contributes to the lower numbers, which is a bit of a misnomer, right? At the time where the numbers were greater within JPD, you also didn't have some of the law enforcement agencies we now have. The Jackson Public School District, for example, did not have its own police force, and they now do. You had officers within JPD who were often assigned making sure that safety was in order at our school, within our school district, but now they have their own independent law enforcement agency, and so that pulls from the numbers. Right?
So with that being said, do you have other law enforcement entities, like with JPD? We also now have the Capitol Complex District, where we have our Capitol Police, and I understand that there is talk about increasing that number of officers as it relates to the Capitol Complex District. If that is the case, how will that impact positively or negatively in terms of the city of Jackson being able to provide protection for its citizens?
Well, I'll say this. Chief Davis, from my discussions with him, along with Chief Wade, has always demonstrated a willingness to work across or work with any partnering agency, law enforcement agency, and that will remain. I will say that there is this competition for resources amongst these various agencies. And without question, the Jackson Police Department has far more extensive history and know-how in dealing with violent crime. This is what they do. Our discussions with the Capitol Complex Police, I think that they have been able to secure more officers that have more sufficient tenure in the law enforcement area and dealing with patrol as of late. But this is still something that is within the wheelhouse of Jackson Police Department, and that is why these investments of the things like the ballistic technology and other things are necessary. The principal responsibility, I know that they patrol in other areas, but the principal responsibility of the Hinds County Sheriff's Department is to maintain a jail, right? And so their support in terms of patrol, you know, and this isn't a criticism of leadership in any way, it's just a fact. It's minimal. It's minimal support in the city of Jackson. And so this is something that has largely been a vessel of the Jackson Police Department, or them being the vessel that deals with the issue of violent crime within our city.
So in the immediate, if we can discuss just in the immediate now, I know we got some long-range plans that we want to do, but in the immediate, and talking with the chief last session and working with a request that he had in regard to monitors, we did make that request here of the legislature to get additional monitors. I don't know if that's going to be an additional request that you're going to come back forth to ask us for now. And I'm just dismayed. I mean, fact is what it is in terms of the numbers we were talking about in terms of field releasing. I think we all are kind of concerned about, you know, why we're having to arrest, and go back and forth. So for me, that's an immediate remedy that we need to try to find out what we need to do. So I will look forward to addressing that when you make your request. What do we need to do? First of all, if you're going to continue the monitors, working with the Capitol Police Department to see if we're going to work and still need additional monitors. And secondly, what do we need to do or can do as it relates to field releasing, which we're talking about the holding facility. What can we do so that our citizens will know that we are trying to eliminate that issue?
Yeah. So the specific requests, you know, go back to a number of things. One, the holding facility is a helpful tool. More cameras for the real-time crime center is another one that we've mentioned. The ballistic technology that allows them to shorten the time of their investigations is useful to them. I think it is also important to recognize that where a lot of the funding, you know, I'm going to advocate for Jackson Police Department, not just because it falls under the command of the city of Jackson, but because I think we have to recognize that there is more long-standing know-how in dealing with these challenges within the Jackson Police Department. And so those are some of the tools that we need. There's something that I'm forgetting right now, Tori, that I wanted to mention. That
The municipal court judges.
yes, the municipal court judges. Because of the backlog that Chief Wade mentioned, we're going to have to be aggressive, whether it's the multiple offenders, those individuals that when they're rearrested, if you have more judges that are available for hearings that can immediately see that person, immediately address the fact that while they're out on bond, because the state constitution, which is a conflict between the consent decree and the state constitution, if there is it deals with violent crimes of 5 years or more, but there is statements within the constitution that if you're out on bond, and while you're out on bond, you reoffend, right? Then there is the opportunity to deny bond going forward. And so we need to be able to adjudicate these matters as quickly as possible. If you have more judges, you have to have more prosecutors. We also have to have the ability to expand our public defender sector so that people who don't have sufficient means can be represented.
Yeah, if I could add one more piece to that, let me clean up something too. We talk about the 6,000 plus that have been fear released. The 3,000 that we arrested in 2021 went through the process of being booked in. The fingerprint, the picture, we checked them to see if they're wanted anywhere else. And also the 2,000 plus, the 3,000 plus that were arrested in 2022, they went through the booking process. The 6,218 didn't go through a booking process. They were released after the initial contact on the street. They were not taken anywhere to go through a process. They were fear released on the street. So that creates a huge issue. This holding facility would afford us the opportunity to put them through a booking process to see if they're wanted anywhere else across the country, not just by them giving us their name, but by running their fingerprint through a database, by taking their picture for investigative purposes. So there is a need for holding facilities simply because it's going to help us speed up the process, the judicial process, the criminal justice process. These 6,000 plus are not coming back to court when you fear release them. Only 30% are returning to court. So you have 70% that are not going to be held accountable, and they're thriving in that environment of no consequence that we talked about earlier.
At the risk of going on and on and on again, I do want to make one point very clear. When I'm asking for the ballistic technology, and what I'm talking about these are devices that can be used on the scene, right? The reason that helps is because when we talk about the backlog of cases within the circuit court, it is often because it's not, you can't simply put it on the district attorney or even the judges, because when they're unable to complete a file because they're still waiting on the ballistic technology, or because they're waiting on an analysis of drugs, right? Then they can't go to trial until that file is complete. And so being able to do that on the scene means that, what may have been a misdemeanor offense for shooting in the city, now when you pick up those shells and you're able to associate that with a murder or shooting that has taken place in the city, and you have that preliminary examination that gives you the probable cause, then now you have taken somebody out of the category of field release, and you've put them in the category of being detained until, more significant proceedings can be held against them.
And then you answered my other question, because you mentioned about the state crime lab that process evidence for the whole state.
Yes.
And that because of that, there's a delay there also in the judicial process. And so I was going to also ask you what is needed, if you know, regarding the state crime lab, so that we can process evidence more readily, so we don't have a 2-year backlog of waiting to have a trial because you don't have the evidence.
My understanding is that they are severely understaffed and unable to process the mountain of evidence in front of them. You have to remember, not only do these professionals have to be able to analyze the data in front of them or the materials in front of them, they then have to go to court and testify of their findings, their scientific findings. And so that stretches them in a number of ways. Having the people physically there to deal in the office with what has to be analyzed, but then the fact that they have to leave, they need more that can deal with that.
Representative Gibbs, I did want to add this because you asked, we don't have the numbers on the crime lab, but we do have the numbers on the holding facility. We received a quote last January on the holding facility for the necessary repairs, and it was $825,000. Since that time, in working with the county has invested approximately $50,000 in repairs to the facility. So we need at least another, I think it's $700 and something thousand just to complete the renovation, just to complete the repairs on the facility to get it to a point where we can afford to operate it.
How much is the city willing to contribute to that?
Well, I will say this, the city is already having to contribute to the personnel and also having to, when it comes to staffing it, we will also have to invest in getting more detention officers, having medical staff, having...
I understand that, but to get it up and running, a holding facility, how much are we talking about?
How much are we talking about? At least $1 million just to start is what our goal is. If we can get at least $1 million, I think we would have sufficient funding for those initial contracts and also for the repairs.
I want to make it clear in terms of the overall effort to present a robust public safety plan. With the vacancies that we've had through the course of time, we've cannibalized a lot of those so that we could return it into attractive salaries for our officers. So the city remains, in terms of a principled stance, willing to give everything that we can towards the effort, but we are stretched beyond our capacity, and so that's why we need more support.
I understand, and I understand, and that's a fair statement, but I want you to understand the state of Mississippi is willing to help, but we do like to be met halfway.
Yeah.
Before I go back to the lady from Hines for one more question, are there any members on Zoom that have any questions? If you do, just notify us. I don't see any. If they pop up, just let me know. But lady from Hines.
All right. I have one last follow-up question. I think one last question. I think you mentioned a moment ago that the city just recently approved its most recent budget. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay. Can you tell me what the top 2 or 3 items are that the city is spending the most money on under the most recent budget?
Primarily infrastructure. We redirected funds and things that we were prioritizing specific to water and maintaining that. But infrastructure and public safety are the top priorities.
Those are the top 2 things. So if we looked at the city's budget, we would see that water and public safety are taking up the bulk of the city's budget?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Water, whether it will directly look like water, it's a commitment to public works. And so you may not know that that's water, but the Public Works Department and our public safety sector, so I just want to make that clarifying point. But our priority is dealing with the water and our public safety.
Mayor, we're going to wrap up real quick, but I want to ask a few things. The police chiefs both have mentioned they're about 50 people short on their the staff, getting people there. Is that 50 on the street? 50 at the command center, or what?
I'm going to let the chiefs answer that.
Okay. All right, we talk about the 248 that we currently have staffed. We talk about the 304 that we're budgeted for. Of course, we, like any other agency or organization, we have people that are in a modified capacity. We have people that are serving their country in a military capacity, and we have officers who are out on maternity leave. So that may be 20 officers. So the other 220, 230 are actually working in capacity as Jackson police officers, which span over 4 different divisions within the police department. The largest contingency of Jackson police officers work in our patrol division. Most of them work in patrol in precincts 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have another contingency that works in investigations. They investigate felony crimes as they occur within the city of Jackson. Then we have other officers who work in training, administration, and other particular areas, but the largest amount of Jackson police officers work in our patrol area. As we get these numbers up, these new recruits, and we anticipate having a class in January. We anticipate that being about 15 to 20 individuals. They're not going to investigation, they're going to patrol.
Okay.
We need them out there on the street.
So that 304 number is your total police force, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, that we're budgeted for this budget.
How much is at the real time? Is that staff 24/7?
No, it is not presently.
Your goal is to get there.
Yes.
Yes.
So it seems to me that we've discussed a lot today, and I appreciate that, and a lot of plans for the future and stuff going. But it seems to me that in the interim, our two major concerns are this holding facility and getting our police force to where it needs to be at 304. I understand, and I'm all for you. I'm 100% behind you with what you're talking about, getting the community involvement with the mental health and all of that. But again, I think that's eating an elephant a little bit and getting there. We have to, right now, in the meantime, I want people coming back to the city of Jackson. I want people to come here to see our Civil Rights Museum, to come and watch Jackson State, to come and shop and eat here, and I want them not to be afraid to do that. It seems to me that the most imperative thing for us to do right now is to get our police force where it needs to be, and to get you the tools, whether it be at the real-time command center and at the holding facility, to get that up and running, and then we can start eating the elephant and getting into the socioeconomic issues, Mayor, that you talked about. To me, I think that is where I'm looking at things, just to let you know, and to boil it down, I think that's what a lot of this testimony has come to, is we got to kind of crawl before we can walk.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and we just want to be met, halfway, so to speak, or to be assisted in our overall efforts. We're very realistic that the buffet of things that we put forward, that not everything is going to be supported. But we want to be able to check things off the list. To your point, I think that, and sometimes to some people's dismay, I make this clarification. We're talking about our need for officers, which we do have, right, which is a priority. We talk about our detention center, which, as several times referenced within this discussion, is a priority. But there is a deeper issue at play when 62% of your homicides are straight disputes and domestic violence, right? And so I have to ask myself the question, and I just want us to attack this from the most comprehensive and intelligent way, and not just speaking to the body in front of us. I'm often talking to our team. How are we intercepting these matters that a law enforcement officer is not going to be in someone's home, right? They're not going to be amongst friends in their car or any of these places where individuals who know each other are killing one another. And so we just want to look at that. There was one other point that I wanted to make when you were talking about the number of officers, and I wanted to let you know that the city of Jackson is willing to be creative as well in terms of how we best utilize our officers' time. Whether it's the real-time crime center, that doesn't require certified officers to man those cameras. Or if we're talking about the issue of traffic violations or accidents, there are many cities across the nation who have made the shift to citizens or civilians actually being the ones who drive out to those accidents and do the reports and whatever accident reconstruction needs to be done. Because an accident can take several hours and can command the time of our officers. That means when calls for service are going out, those officers are having to leave or deal with that matter in order to address the more serious crimes. And so we want to be creative in that way.
And it's important both things can be true. We need more officers, and we need to get to the root of the issues. One last question. as far as you use this word, or these two words, this phrase, a straight dispute. Is your intent there, is that a gang relation? Is that drug activity? Or are you saying that in a monolithic way of saying this is between people who have griefs between each other?
So as I saw this data, I had questions myself as to what specifically straight disputes mean. I will provide a follow-up analysis of what our data scientist means by straight disputes. I have my hypothesis, but before I put that on the table, I'll just get you an accurate answer, an accurate response to that, and we'll submit it to the committee.
Any further questions from any members? Lady from Madison, real quick, if you can do that.
I keep going back to the report you said many years ago, whatever, was 500 is what they recommended, but then there's been a population fall, and we have budgeted for 304 now. Why do we not get a new report? Because I have in my mind that there should be at least 450 officers on the street of Jackson right now. So we keep going back to what number we have budgeted, and we hadn't hit that number, but why aren't we increasing that number anyway? Why is that number not bigger? I guess I can't get that straight. And also, why don't we budget for resource officers in every school?
Well, in terms of the resource officers, because there's been the creation of a new law enforcement agency that has jurisdiction over our schools, that is why JPD, unless asked for assistance, does not interfere in terms of the operations within our school districts. Now, and they often ask for assistance, and JPD is on scene to help. With respect to budgeting, we have budgeted in the past. This is this year's number of 304. When I came in office, we were budgeted for far more, and there's been continuous efforts. In fact, before I came in office, there hadn't been a recruiting class in nearly 4 years. Now we execute multiple recruiting classes within each year to make sure that we bring on as many officers as we can. So our efforts to build the numbers are continuous, but those external and internal factors that need to be corrected make that a difficult endeavor to achieve. And so we keep plugging away at it. Our last recruiting class was a significant one of the larger ones that we've seen in a while. I can't help but think that there's an association with the increased salaries that took place. And so prayerfully, we'll see more of that. With respect to the studies, we're not opposed to a study, but what I fundamentally disagree with is that the city of Jackson continuously commissions studies. We fail to execute what the studies teach us, right, for years and years and years. And then we, pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for another study, only for it to tell us again what the study that we previously had paid for told us. And so, obviously, there is value to updated information, and potentially that could be useful. But we have to be able to check off the list a lot of the points within the laundry list of things that we're supposed to do from the previous studies that we have commissioned.
The only other thing I'll add for clarity on your question specific to the budget is that one of the ways, when we have limited resources, so one of the ways that we were able to do the raises for our officers was by eliminating some of those vacant positions. So we had initially budgeted for a lot more officers, but we were unable to fill those positions. So the way we were able to give police officers raises is those vacant positions, we use that money to pay more money to the officers we already had.
We have put on the table other options of funding the increases to our officers, but as y'all are well aware, in the legislative process, there are negotiations to how you get there. While there was consensus on raising our officers' salaries, the methodology in which we achieved that was one that we had to compromise on. And so going forward, we will revisit some of the alternatives. In fact, one of the alternatives I put forward was, out of a conversation that surfaced from myself and the mayor of Pearl and what they chose to do. And so to your point, the city of Jackson will always put skin in the game. We will meet you halfway. But there are some fundamental priorities that we have to be able to get to immediately.
Thank you so much. And Chief Davis, you let me know if you need any of our help in getting the reporting system in and up and running, because I look forward to seeing what the future holds on that. Thank y'all so much for being
Mayor,
here.
thank you. Before you go, Representative Chris Bell has informed us that a straight dispute means Jackson State 24, Alcorn State 13. So.
You're going to create a straight dispute amongst Chief Davis and my communications director, because she went to Alcorn. So.
I understand. Mayor, thank you. You're always welcome to this committee, okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We'll take just a little bathroom break. We'll be back in 5 minutes.